Namaskar and thank you for joining us on this special live coverage of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States of America. Now, the Prime Minister has had a bilateral meeting with the US President Joe Biden. It happened in Wilmington in Delaware and Claremont, and he will now join his counterparts from Australia, Albanese, and Japan, Kishida, along with the host US President Joe Biden for the fourth in-person Quad Leaders Summit in Wilmington and Delaware. And we'll get you updates on these meetings with inputs from Amritpal Singh, who's there, and also Shubhendu Ghosh. We just saw the visuals of the bilateral meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden. Here again, once again, now the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held talks with the US President Joe Biden. This happened in Wilmington, and both the leaders, they reviewed the bilateral relations between the two countries. Discussions focused on ways to further deepen the bilateral partnership, a comprehensive strategic partnership, a special one in areas of mutual interest. And the leaders exchanged their views on global as well as regional issues, including the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. Prime Minister Modi will also, as we said, hold bilateral meetings with other leaders on the sidelines of the Quad Summit in Wilmington, Delaware, besides attending that Quad Summit and addressing a key meeting in the UN General Assembly a little later. Today he's focusing on the Quad. Now, the US President Joe Biden, in fact, in a social media post on X, he shared photos of his meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In the social media post, Biden wrote that the US partnership with India is stronger, closer, and more dynamic than any time in history. And Biden was emotional as well in his post. We could sense that. He said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, each time we sit down, I'm struck by our ability to find new areas of cooperation. Today was no different. That was the message on Joe Biden's Twitter account. Now, Amritpal Singh is joining us from Wilmington in the United States, state of Delaware, with more on that. So, Amrit, already India and the United States cooperate on so many sectors. It's multi-sectoral, as we know. And President Biden says he's fascinated that, every time he meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they find new areas of cooperation. Could you fill us in with some of the new areas?
Well, that's right, and that was reflective on the body language of the two leaders when they met. A warm embrace when Prime Minister arrived at the ancestral home or the personal home of President Biden, which is here in Wilmington, actually on the suburbs of Wilmington in the Delaware state. So this meeting lasted over an hour, where the two sides reviewed the entire gamut of the relationship. As you know, it's a comprehensive strategic partnership. The new areas that you asked, the stress was essentially on new and emerging technologies, especially cooperation, the need for increased cooperation in areas like semiconductors, in areas of quantum computing, in areas of exchanges between the two countries when it comes to students, when it comes to research, high-level research, and of course the need to increase the trade ties between the two countries, and also investments, especially in the sector of defense and defense manufacturing and co-production. Prime Minister Modi stressed the need for the two countries to build a case of jointly fighting climate change and the role of technology in that. And so we'll have to look at this relationship, even though President Biden is hanging his spurs later this year, but at the end of this year. But this relationship, though, has a personal dimension to it, but goes beyond that. It is beyond Modi and Biden. It is really the strengthening of relations between India and the US that came out today at the bilateral meeting. Mark.
Right. Amrit, we'll unpack some of what you said, but we are also joined by Dr. Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow at Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. Thank you, Dr. Rao, for being with us. Put into context, the meeting so far is between President Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And the idea is that he's so happy that I'm talking about Biden in his tweet. He says that there are new areas of cooperation every time they meet. How do you look at this, ma'am?
As far as the new, first of all, good evening to you, Mark. And I mean, it's quite amazing how what kind of a momentum do we see in India-US relations? Because I think one of the things that needs to be underscored is that nobody could have imagined this 10 years ago. So I think what we need to do is that we need to sort of make sure that there is consolidation. So of course, one of the key objectives of this, not just the Quad meeting, but also the bilateral, the US-India bilateral, is to also consolidate, what the two sides have done, especially in the last 10 years. That's one. And the other thing is to also look continuously for newer areas of convergence, because, there is this one thing that we all need to understand, that no two states will have a perfect convergence of views or of strategic interests, right? There would always be divergences. The idea of foreign policy coordination is to basically expand the convergences and minimize the divergences. And one of the key ways in which you sort of take that forward is by the right framing of, these strategic convergences. And how do you do that? You do that by sort of, making sure that the relationship evolves. So I guess that perhaps is the intent of where what President Biden meant when he said that newer areas. And I think before Prime Minister Modi went there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but of course I did read it, that India and the US are looking at least two agreements. So I would perhaps expect that we would have some new kind of an overture in the space domain,
Right.
because India has signed on the Artemis Accords. If you know, the Artemis Accord is a multilateral kind of a mission that the US has for the moon. I mean, Artemis is another name for moon.
Right.
And this has been unusual on the Indian side, Mark, to be honest,
Right.
because India is not really known to sign on these kind of multilateral initiatives, which are especially led by the US. India would be very conservative. But despite that, you see that willingness on the Indian side to walk that extra mile. And you always see that willingness on the US side also to walk the extra mile. Apart from that, I would perhaps also think of, more maritime domain convergence, because undersea domain awareness has been one part of our defense industrial roadmap, which was signed in June 2023.
Right.
And this again is very closely related to the IPMDA, which is the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, which is among the 4 Quad partners. So one thing that really makes Quad special is not that it is a fluid plurilateral in the vast domain of Indo-Pacific. What
Yes.
makes the Quad truly special is that India doesn't only have this convergence, of interest with 3 partners, but India also has excellent bilateral ties with each one of these partners. So I
Absolutely.
would perhaps, link the two and say that, these kind of things would actually finally complement each other, because end of the day, when you're speaking about maritime domain, you're talking about, how to provide a lasting, sustainable security architecture. You would perhaps want to put your act together when it comes to real-time linking of the domain awareness, the maritime domain awareness. So I think these are the things that we would be talking about.
Yes.
I honestly do not see too much development, say, for example, on the trade issues, because everybody knows that President Biden is going to be going to
Yes, he's
step
leaving
down
office, yes.
in a few months. Yes, so I would probably not see anything like that. But things
True.
which have enjoyed the bipartisan consensus in the US towards India. Yeah.
We'll turn once again to Amrit. Amrit, you did mention about trade and investment. You talked about defense security, critical and emerging technologies, clean energy, space. These are all areas that were discussed. Now, when we look at the continuation of policy, because as Dr. Rao has been saying, there's that, and you have been mentioning as well, that Biden is demitting office. In this context, is there some sort of a hope that is being addressed in this meeting, that this relationship is moving in a particular direction, that even the next administration, whichever side, will take it at that pace forward?
Yes, the relationship has got institutionalized in the sense that individuals do not really cast that much of a shadow. Yes, there is personal agency in any relationship, but it goes beyond that. It's basically when nations agree to cooperate, it's convergence of interest. So it's really in the mutual interest of India and the United States to cooperate in the areas that you mentioned, and the deal, say, between the for the manufacturing of the engines between GE and HAL, that would continue despite, irrespective of what administration or what party comes to power in the United States. The very fact that Prime Minister Modi and President Biden could hold a discussion for this long, of course they were accompanied by their delegations, means that there is a continuing interest, and that would continue, because even if you look at the US elections, there is, when it comes to India, there is no real policy difference between the two parties when it comes to the relationship with India. They may have different views on immigration, etc., and that that may have some bearing, indirect bearing on, say, the H-1B visas, etc. But then it is also in their interest to utilize India's huge talent pool. They have, of course, their domestic economics to take care of. So I think, but the value that, say, the Indian diaspora brings here, or the Indian immigrants bring here, they do realize that. And I think this relationship, to answer your question, goes beyond President Biden or any particular president, person who takes office here in the United States.
We are also joined by Ambassador Anil Kumar Trigunayat, a former senior diplomat who is joining us from Gurugram near Delhi. Ambassador Trigunayat, critical and emerging technologies has been one of the new areas of cooperation between India and the United States. And of course, the Prime Minister will be addressing the Summit of the Future. In this context, when we look at the future, and the deep cooperation that the two countries can share going forward. After all, India is going to take its place on the podium, amongst the top 3 economies of the world in a short span of time. So the stronger cooperation between India and the United States, especially in these newer areas, is vital, isn't it?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Going forward, the world is going to be only dealing with technology, and technological superiority, expediency, is what is going to dictate your place in the world, as simple as that. And in that case, this ICET and the NDAS, that the programs that we have signed with the United States, the kind of collaboration that we have with them, is very important. The fact is that there should be a timely delivery of these, which is very important. And I think that is something that Prime Minister Modi will be discussing, would have discussed rather, with President Biden. Even though President Biden is in the last couple of months. But still, I think that technological cooperation is going to be the backbone of this relationship going forward. I fully agree with Amrit when he said that there is not going to be any great difference between whichever the president takes place or whichever the party. The fact remains is the United States, also like any other country, its foreign policy aimed at serving its own national interests, geopolitical interests. And India today is a strategic pivot in their policy, be it in the Indo-Pacific or elsewhere, be it in the economy or trade sectors, technological cooperation, human resource, HADR, and everything else. And that's why this is an important relationship which needs to go forward. But at the end of the day, we need to see, and as Dr. Jaishankar often says, that 3 M's need to be a part of this, any relationship for that matter, and more so, it should be a relationship of equal partners. And that, I believe, is like mutual interest, mutual respect, and mutual sensitivities. Those are very important, and we have issues there which are going to be discussed by both sides. And I think that this is important to do so between the friends and be very clear about it. So I am a realist, and I believe that it's an important, but this meeting is also, apart from the bilateral domain, is extremely important, not only in the Quad concept, but in what Prime Minister Modi has done in recent times to bring about little peace in the European context of the Russia-Ukraine war. and he would be briefing him about all these issues, which are very important. And the United States has to be a major factor if at all any peace has to come in Russia-Ukraine war or in the Middle East.
Dr. Swasi Rao, you can comment on that point, the concept that there could be peace and India could play an important role in it. How would you look at the possibilities after this meeting? Of course, we still don't know what actually transpired in terms of this particular topic. But what do you think? I mean, the likely outcomes. After all, the Prime Minister did visit both Russia and Ukraine in the recent past.
Yeah. There are a couple of points, I think, that need to be communicated in the right context, Mark. One is that, well, the Russia-Ukraine war by itself is not really coming to an end. So, I mean, unlike a lot of discussion that followed after Prime Minister went to both to Russia and then later to Ukraine, you know, there was this assumption that perhaps the war is going to be coming to an end and therefore India is stepping up its game. I think that was a misreading. The war is not coming to an end because if you really carefully study the war dynamics, you see the war entering a phase which is escalatory, you know, to say the least. So I don't see the war coming to an end right away. However, by reaffirming India's credibility as you know, as a player that can really mediate whenever the time is right, that can really you know, has this equal relationship when it comes to Russia on the one hand and the West, you know, basically the collective West, because it's not just the US, you know, our ties with so many European partners are also excellent. In fact, one of the lasting legacies of the Modi era is going to be the kind of, you know, diplomatic footprint that has risen, you know, India's diplomatic footprint that has risen in Europe. But coming back to the main thing, so whenever, I mean, India has reaffirmed its credibility as a voice that can be speaking to both Russia and the West at the same time.
Right.
Also, India has come up as a humanitarian actor, which is very important. And like I said, that from India's perspective, being a part of this conversation is important not only for mediation.
Right.
I personally do not see that India has any specific, so to say, capabilities to actually mediate in a meaningful way. But as far as communicating messages from one side or to the other is concerned, or coming up with more flexible, resilient, innovative solutions. You know, if you remember, innovative solutions was this phrase which was used in our joint statement with Ukraine later. Yes, I do see that India has a much bigger role in the reconstruction of Ukraine, and that would open up, you know, a lot of things for Indian investments. So that's one part. Yeah. The other thing is that when it comes to the West, I do feel that India and the West today have a more comfortable space where the West also has given up its condescending tone. If you remember 2-3 years ago when the war started, the West has really suffered from a very condescending approach, you know, telling India, lecturing India and all that. So I think that has changed and they do understand that India's multi-alignment is ultimately in the Western interest as well, because India's multi-alignment is basically what is going to finally reduce the great power, you know, rivalry. And frankly, let's face it, nobody can really afford a new war in the Taiwan Strait. So it's about all of that.
Let me go across once again to Amritpal Singh and let's move away from the India-US relationship and now focus a little bit on the Quad, Amrit. You know, I mean, the key aspect after all the big meeting is the Quad, and economic and maritime security are the areas you know, that Quad focuses on to a large extent. When we look at the Indo-Pacific, there are about $2 trillion of trade that pass through this area. And of course, one particular country seems to think that the South China Sea is their entire property and not playing by the rules. So to what extent, you know, is this the key issue really that Quad has to deal with?
Okay, Mark, first piece of information, the Quad meeting has just begun. Minutes back, the Quad meeting began at the Archma Academy. That's a private school here. In fact, it's a school to which Joe Biden went as a school student, and I think later his children and grandchildren also went to the same school, given that it's in its hometown. So the meeting has just begun and all the 4 leaders are there. Now, coming to your question, the Indo-Pacific is a very important area given its strategic importance, given its geographical location, given the fact that important sea lanes, trade lanes pass through that, and securing that area and seeing that it's an inclusive area where free, open trade happens, and there is no unilateralism by anyone in that area. So that is one aspect of it. Yes, there are concerns that countries have about the aggression of China or the unilateral approach by them in the South China Sea, even in the East China Sea, in the land border with India. That is a matter of concern, a common concern to all the members of the Quad. So that is one aspect of it, and of course it will be discussed. But India is very clear that India does not see Quad as any kind of military alliance. It does not want to see it as an equivalent of a NATO of the Indo-Pacific. No, it wants to look at it, or that's how it envisions this grouping, a grouping which gives benefits to the countries of the region, especially benefits pertaining to development and meeting the aspirations and goals of the countries, the developing countries, the small island nations in this region. So when Prime Minister addresses the Quad leaders, his primary focus would be to increase Quad's ambit and include give more thrust on cooperation and interlinkages for development in various areas, technology, ICT, disaster resilient infrastructure, clean energy, and cooperate to achieve that, not just within these 4 members of the Quad, but the other countries which are a part of it. And I think there is a certain sense of consensus that the ambit, at least in maritime domain awareness, needs to be increased to include the IOR or the Indian Ocean region. So cooperation in these areas is what would also figure prominently, apart from, of course, the security, the peace and security in the region. Yes,
right. Ambassador Anil Kumar Trigunayat, when we talk about Quad, there was this talk always about ASEAN centrality, and Prime Minister has also just visited Southeast Asia. He went to Singapore and Brunei. So in this context, what is ASEAN centrality as far as Quad is concerned?
Well, ASEAN centrality, everybody is talking about, but talk to the ASEAN countries. They have their own ideas about this centrality. But as far as this Quad summit is concerned and India's perspective, I believe that I would say there are 5 C's that are very important that they're going to discuss. One is, of course, China, which remains there very much. Its dragon is in the room wherever they are sitting now.
Yes.
Second is, of course, connectivity. Then the critical minerals and technologies. And the counter-terrorism is yet another very important factor. And this time something new that has come is cancer moonshot. That is the healthcare that the countries have been focusing for quite some time now. And this will be one of the specific objectives. And we are going to see the fact sheet that will come out, and the joint statement that will come out will be focusing on some of these issues. Apart from that, India, as you know, is also signing up to this IPEF, India-Pacific Economic Forum, in the trade format, as well as we are seeing in the Indo-US drug listings. So all these are going to be applied where India has something. One of the C's India, overtly at least, does not seek out is the containment of China. I mean, that is something, and that's where what was said is that this is supposed to be quadrilateral security dialogue, and there are going to be more closer defense engagement among the 4 countries going forward. But all these 4 countries have very different views about the relationship with China or what they expect from Quad. India has very clearly said it is eking out certain benefits. This time there will be greater focus on the logistics, the maritime domain awareness, and that is also very important. So new ideas will be emerging from these discussions, apart from taking a stock of where have we reached so far. And I fully agree this time also another focus that is going is because China's activities in Indian Ocean is increasing. We are also looking at the US action in Bangladesh that in dislodging the government. And that has compromised India's security as well to some extent. So I think those are the issues which are very important, very significant, and they need to be seen whether Quad can work in a concerted manner to protect everybody's security and not only free and open Indo-Pacific. So I think that those are the things that are very important from India's perspective, and I think that Prime Minister Modi would have raised all those.
Dr. Swasti Rao, all these countries in Quad have, between themselves, they have these 2+2 dialogue mechanisms. So it's clear that, the strategic area is pretty important as far as defense and foreign affairs are concerned. In this context, how do you view, the idea of regional stability, at least in the area where India is playing an important role in the Indian Ocean region? How would you view it? What kind of role is incumbent upon India?
Well, one of the strengths actually of the Quad mechanism is that not only is it a quadrilateral framework where these four countries come together for basically pursuing their shared interests, and despite their own divergences and different views, which, like I said, which is absolutely normal, and I think absolutely okay, which should be okay, and especially among partners, So that's one. I mean, I think one of the strengths of the Quad framework is that India also has excellent ties with all its individual members. So India has a 2+2 mechanism. That's right. A 2+2 mechanism basically essentially means that India has a foreign minister and defense minister level dialogue with all of these partners. So that also strengthens, when these countries come together. And there's also this one vertical about Quad countries, especially, which is the Malabar exercises. And you saw that in 2020 or 2021, Australia joined the Malabar, exercises. And after that, it's become pretty much a kind of a Quad personality it has acquired. So that, of course, helps, Mark. But just one thing that I'd like to mention about more multilateralism, in this particular region is that, there are two things. One is that we all understand that one is about connectivity and all the economic framework. And you did mention in passing about the IPEF, which is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Even if you look into the details of how India has been viewing and approaching IPEF, there are 4 pillars in the IPEF, but India has only signed on 3. So basically, India is actually reviewing what part of that IPEF is actually applicable to where India's economy is today, whether it's about connectivity, resilience of supply chains and clean energy. I think those are issues where we have a broad consensus, even in India domestically. But then there are issues about opening up of of the sectors of our sectors and lowering tariffs. Especially, there are certain traditionally sensitive sectors where we have our misgivings, and we'd like to be more conservative there. So I think that flexibility and that resilience is also something which is great when you're talking about how to make it more accepted in a more multilateral way. And the other part you rightly mentioned is the maritime domain awareness, and why I'd like to sort of again focus on that, because I remember I began my remarks by focusing on the MDA. But I think if you carefully see the core discussions and what we are expecting something to come up with respect to illegal fishing. And this is going to have strategic implications as well, because ultimately you're trying to call out against criminal activity and you're trying to put your act together. You see, the one thing that the Quad countries need to really work on when it comes to the maritime domain awareness, which is actually at the heart of the security architecture. Whenever you're speaking about anything which has to do with this maritime component, which has a maritime component, it is ultimately about how easily and how seamlessly are you able to exchange information on that. So on the one hand, we do have something like the IFC IOR, and I think this is where you sort of make it more enabling. We do have an IFC IOR with more than 40 countries signing up for it. But what happens is that if you carefully see the initiatives that we...
And this is Prime Minister Narendra Modi. These are visuals we've just received a little while earlier of Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving for the Quad meeting, as Amrit had given us information from the ground that this meeting has begun. President Biden receiving Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of the Quad summit. These visuals have come in to us a short while ago, and this is the introduction. This is outside a school in Delaware, where in fact Joe Biden himself had studied. the venue for the Quad Summit. So let's go back to Amrit once again. Amrit, you were talking, in fact, the last time about China and the differing positions that various countries have about China. But you know, the one thing that they do have in common is that that China should be held accountable to at least to the laws of the sea, and there should be a code of conduct for China's behavior in the South China Sea. Isn't that so?
That's right. I mean, you know, the Quad, when it looks at China, the China question, it looks at it as, you know, stopping unilateralism of any player, in this case China. Though China sees it as US and its and other countries ganging
Well, they call it the Asian NATO.
But that's not really, calling it the Asian NATO. So clearly the Quad does not see it as Asian NATO or a military alliance. It sees unilateralism by anyone is inimical to the interests of a fair, open, inclusive world order, especially in the Asia, in the Indo-Pacific region. So the convergence of these countries, the Quad members and some other members who are countries who are not members of the Quad.
Yes, Amrit, carry on speaking. We are showing visuals as you speak, Amrit, of the four leaders, of the Quad leaders, President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Albanese and Prime Minister Kishida, waving out to the press and media just before all of them going in once again for that in-person meeting. It's the fourth in-person meeting. Go ahead, Amrit. You were continuing your views.
Yeah, so the visuals that you're beaming right now are basically the family photograph that's taking place on the porch where the four leaders greet and pose for a photograph as they go inside for the substantive part of the meeting. The leaders have now gone inside, and as I said, the Quad meeting has begun. Where, of course, all leaders make opening statements and then extended discussions take place. As Ambassador Trigunath was saying, that they will take stock of what happened in the previous year, where the Quad has come, where the Quad needs to go, what are the areas of cooperation that can be added, and the ambit and scope of Quad as a grouping can be increased and strengthened, even strengthening the cooperation on existing areas of cooperation, strengthening that, increasing that, and adding new areas to that. So that all will happen at this Quad summit over the next 2 hours.
Right, Amrit, also, will we be able to hear what each of the leaders is saying? Are cameras inside allowed for their opening statements?
That's right. So you shall be getting that in a little while from now.
Right. Let's go across to Ambassador Trigunath once again. Quad, as you were saying, is much more than just the strategic domain. It's all about seeing that the entire Indo-Pacific has an inclusive identity, that there is development takes place. One of the big things that Quad sees as a success is the way that they dealt with COVID together, and they gave out about 5 million vaccines. And since then, the health aspect has become very important, because after all, a number of the smaller countries in the Indo-Pacific, smaller island countries as well, really don't find themselves, the healthcare aspect is kind of lacking, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And that is why India was really, I would say, pleased with that, because we had done remarkably well during the pandemic in extending assistance to the world, when some of these very countries who are our partners, who are trying to keep the vaccines for certain geopolitical purposes. But eventually, this became one of the major takeaways for India, and India has been working on it. And it was a collaborative effort on the part of all four. And that's the reason now this time this cancer moonshot. This is very interesting terminology that they have used. And it is going to have its own separate fact sheet and how it can be implemented in the Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean countries and others. And so I think the health security is one of the most important securities.
Go ahead, Ambassador Thrugunayat, please. Yeah.
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 So you're right, absolutely. I mean, apart from many other challenges that we are facing globally and locally in the region, this health security remains a major priority, which has been a wake-up call in the wake of basically the pandemic, and it has taught us all to work together. And I think that there is a greater focus on that, and it's a low-hanging fruit.
Indeed,
that the Quad can really get to deliver in all the regions, because there are these various specific ways of doing anything by themselves. Yeah.
Indeed. I think one of the areas, Dr. Swasi Rao, that's going to affect the seas is climate change, and the Pacific Islands will also be affected, obviously, to a large extent by this. Is there, some sort of concern that Quad will probably be looking at in terms of, some of the big issues with regard to water levels rising?
Well, I mean, it's not just Quad alone. I think it's before we get into what Quad thinks on climate change and whether climate change has been on the agenda, whether there are enabling frameworks put in place for tackling the issue of climate change. I think there's one thing that we need to understand is that when it comes to the Indo-Pacific and all the different kinds of security challenges that we are facing in the Indo-Pacific region, which is a massive region, by the way, Quad is not really a magic wand. Quad.
We are cutting across live to listen to President Biden.
Our four countries have are more strategically aligned than ever before. And today, we're announcing a series of initiatives to deliver real, positive impact for the Indo-Pacific that includes providing new maritime technologies to our regional partners so they know what's happening in their waters, launching cooperation between Coast Guards for the first time, and expanding the Quad Fellowship to include students from Southeast Asia. So I want to thank you all again for being here. You've come a long way to get here, and I appreciate it. And while challenges will come, the world will change because the Quad is here to stay, I believe, here to stay. And I'm going to turn it over now to all of you, and I'd like to start by recognizing Prime Minister Modi.
Your Excellencies,
President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida, and Prime Minister Albanese. It gives me immense pleasure to participate at this Quad Summit today with friends very early on in my third term. There cannot be
President एमट्रेक जो के रूप में आप जिस प्रकार से इस शहर और डेलावेयर से जुड़े रहे हैं, कुछ वैसा ही रिश्ता आपका क्वाड से भी रहा है। आपके नेतृत्व में 2021 में पहली समिट का आयोजन किया गया और इतने कम समय में हमने अपने सहयोग को हर दिशा में अभूतपूर्व तरीके से बढ़ाया है। इसमें व्यक्तिगत रूप से आपकी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही है। मैं क्वाड के लिए आपकी दृढ़ प्रतिबद्धता, आपके नेतृत्व और आपके योगदान के लिए आपको हृदय से धन्यवाद देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, हमारी बैठक ऐसे समय हो रही है जब विश्व तनावों और संघर्षों से घिरा हुआ है। ऐसे में साझा डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज के आधार पर क्वाड का मिलकर साथ चलना पूरी मानवता के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। हम किसी के खिलाफ नहीं हैं। हम सभी एक रूल्स बेस्ड इंटरनेशनल ऑर्डर, संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता के सम्मान और सभी मसलों के शांतिपूर्ण ढंग से हल निकालने का समर्थन करते हैं। फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक हमारी साझा प्राथमिकता और साझा प्रतिबद्धता है। हमने मिलकर हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, क्रिटिकल एंड इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजीज, क्लाइमेट चेंज, कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग जैसे क्षेत्रों में कई सकारात्मक और समावेशी इनिशिएटिव लिए हैं। हमारा मैसेज साफ है, क्वाड इज हियर टू स्टे, टू असिस्ट, टू पार्टनर एंड टू कॉम्प्लीमेंट। मैं एक बार फिर राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन और सभी साथियों का अभिवादन करता हूं। 2025 में क्वाड लीडर्स समिट का आयोजन भारत में करने में हमें खुशी होगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद। अब मैं अपने प्रिय मित्र शीदा को बोलते हैं।
तो ये सीधी तस्वीर आप इस वक्त डेलावेयर अमेरिका से देख रहे हैं, जहां पे क्वाड शिखर सम्मेलन।
Live footage, as we heard, both of the US President Biden and his comments, and then Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Briefly, let me tell you what Prime Minister Modi said. He thanked, first of all, Biden for his leadership, which has been especially important and powerful for the Quad and the importance of Quad. He talked about the importance of the Quad at this particular time, especially when the situation in the world is such that the importance of democratic values is more important at this time. And he also talked about the Quad looking for the idea that it's not against anyone, and in fact it is for a rules-based order and peaceful solutions to disputes, and the importance of a free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific, and the new areas of which is emerging technology, climate change, health, all these areas that we've been talking about. And India, of course, will be hosting the next summit in 2025. Let's go to Dr. Swasti Rao, who's still with us. What do you make of Prime Minister's opening remarks, Dr. Rao?
Very positive opening remarks as always. I was not expecting anything less. And when it comes to China, I have been making this point, which is a very obvious one, that yes, China agnosticism is going to remain with India because it is in India's interests. I mean, that is how India has been looking at the world. It's a very intrinsic worldview that India has. We do not really believe in alliances against any one player. In fact, we believe in collaborative frameworks. So that's the positive part of why I feel China agnosticism is correct. But there's also another part, which is that if we were to sort of, get into this name calling against China, then what happens is that you start really playing into the Chinese narrative, because that's what the Chinese have been saying of the Quad. They've been saying that Quad is a nation, NATO, etc., etc. So I think these are two basic reasons why I think China agnosticism was expected, and Prime Minister made it very clear that we do not really believe in this. Countering of anyone else. We actually believe in a very positive virtue of a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is basically a win-win situation for everybody, because a unilateral change to status quo is something that most of the actors in the region, whether they
Master would be shocked that I find myself here as well. So it is absolutely delightful to be here amongst friends. And I thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us in your home state, your home school, and for giving us an insight into what's made you such an extraordinary world leader. And it's fantastic as well to be here, of course, with Prime Minister Kishida. We met earlier, and we certainly wish you well. And Prime Minister Modi will be hosting us next year, and I look forward to that as well. Unlike some international forums, the Quad it doesn't have a long history. That means it's not defined by tradition, but it also means it's not confined by it. It means that as it develops, it can evolve, and that is, I believe, what is happening. We represent in this region the fastest growing region of the world in human history. With that comes enormous opportunity, but also comes some challenges. Through the Quad, our 4 countries collaborate and we coordinate on the issues facing our communities, but the region as a whole. Through the Quad, we leverage our significant resources and expertise to contribute in meaningful ways to dealing with challenges facing countries in the region. And we ensure that we assert the view that national sovereignty is important, that security and stability is something that we strive for, as well as shared prosperity in our region. The Quad is about practical, meaningful outcomes in strategic areas ranging from clean energy and dealing with the challenge, but also the opportunity that climate change represents, health security to critical and emerging technologies, cyber resilience, infrastructure, maritime security, and of course counter-terrorism as well. We'll always be better off when like-minded countries and our 4 great democracies work together. All of this, the promise in the region, does depend on continued peace and stability and the wise management of strategic competition and disputes. Partnerships like the Quad are crucial, providing us with an avenue to discuss shared responsibilities and goals and strengthening the enduring relationships necessary for lasting stability, which is why we commit today to continue to work with our Indo-Pacific neighbours, our friends and our partners. So I think today we have some practical initiatives that we've been working on together. The sum of the 4 individual parts, when it comes together, mean that it's more effective, the work that we can do, and I look forward to some practical outcomes in the tradition that the Quad has created, and it's wonderful to be here, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, those were the opening statements. We did hear them from the U.S. President, Joe Biden, who, in fact, talked about new maritime technology being shared, new Coast Guard cooperation. He talked about a Quad fellowship for students of Southeast Asia, and he did say that Quad is going to continue. Quad will remain strong. And I did mention also what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, but let me get back to that once again. Prime Minister Modi said that he thanked President Biden for his leadership. He talked about the importance of democracies at this time, the values of democracies, how they are not against anyone, and how this grouping is not against anyone. He also talked about rules-based order and peaceful solutions to disputes. How the Quad looks for a free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. They talked about the new areas of emerging technology, climate change, health, and India, of course, is going to be hosting the next Quad Summit 2025. 2 leaders will not be there at that summit. One will be Prime Minister Kishida. We unfortunately were not able to hear what he said because we didn't have the translation. And we did hear Prime Minister Albanese, and he was talking about this region actually being the fastest growing region and the judicious use of resources as a result of that. Of course, Australia is a very resource-rich country, and about the respect for national sovereignties of countries in the region. Let's go back to our guests. We have them on the screen. Ambassador Thrigunayat, as well as Dr. Swasti Rao. Ambassador Thrigunayat, how would you've listened to all the comments, how would you look at the framing of what this Quad Summit is looking at?
Well, I think that the most important thing that every leader has said is that Quad is here to stay.
Yeah.
And that is very important. Secondly, this is we can free and open Indo-Pacific, but Prime Minister Modi talked about free, open, inclusive, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. That's a slant which he has been maintaining since Shangri-La days, and that's very important. And this is also looking for a rules-based order. Everybody has said, while Prime Minister Albanese spoke about how to manage this strategic competition, that is also a very important. Through practical steps, greater collaboration and cooperation can go on. So from these initial remarks, what you can get, but of course, President Biden in the beginning itself said that for the first time there are going to be the Coast Guards cooperation, which is an important takeaway from these discussions, that we can expect one of the outcomes in a way. And of course, for all the four countries are democracies. And as you rightly mentioned, that next time India will be hosting, and I think we'll be expecting a much more and more intense agenda by that. And let us see how it eventually plays out. And of course, the document will be out, joint statement, and we'll see how practically the maritime cooperation, which is what everybody is talking about, is going to be further strengthened.
Dr. Swasti Rao, what what do you make of the comments of new maritime technologies being shared? What are these kind of technologies, and to what extent is this cooperation going to be beneficial actually for this inclusive idea of the Indo-Pacific?
Well, I mean, that's the point that I've been trying to make from the beginning, which is that if you look even bilaterally, undersea domain awareness is actually figures in one of the roadmap for India-US defense cooperation last year. Today, you have the four leaders come together and speak about military technologies, etc. I think speaking about the maritime domain, the thing to always remember is that unless you have a real-time linking of your domain awareness, and MDA actually has two parts. One part is military intelligence, the other part is military information, and it depends on the countries that are negotiating it with respect to what kind of cooperation mechanism they wish to get into. But broadly, IPMDA is actually has been designed to enable a near real-time, if not completely real-time, integrated and cost-effective MDA. And why I sort of focus on this is because I think a lot of people don't understand that it is not just about the intent. It is not just about the statement. What you do have, to work on is that you need to have common semantics, like common maritime semantics, to actually exchange that information in a seamless manner. And that is the point that I was referring to when I said that even though we have an IFC IOR, which is kind of, joined by about 40 countries, but in effect, till the time you don't have a real-time linking of your information portals that actually collect this information, which is called domain awareness, you don't really go further. And if you want to sort of collectively tackle things like illegal fishing, which have been coming again and again in this year's Quad agenda, you basically are looking at some kind of a real-time linking. So that would entail a development of a common portal of information sharing. And that requires a lot of legislation, because you're talking about 4 democratic countries, and which are where people actually decide how to go forward, to what level to go forward. And also the case in point being marked that if you remember when it was about intelligence sharing, you remember that there was so much of a hullabaloo about the Five Eyes framework being so active in the Indo-Pacific region, and India and Japan thinking about whether they can. And ultimately, I was the one, and in fact, among many others, who argued that one would only see that kind of an intelligence sharing happening on a case-to-case basis, and not really in a way that sort of changes that framework per se. So similarly, when you're talking about these kind of maritime technologies or domain awareness technologies, which have a component of intelligence, you have to be careful. And like I said, the real-time linking is where this entire security architecture is actually hooked, So that is the real hook. And if you're able to get that right, you would see a lot of progress in no time. So I guess that remains at the heart of it. The other thing is that I think what we also need to be discussing is that India-US relationship and the way we look at the world, there are divergences, there are complexities. And I think a part of the Quad puzzle somewhere gets or would get determined by how really we handle our complexities, right? So I guess there has to be like an awareness and acknowledgement. I think Ambassador mentioned about 3 M's, and I would agree that how we tackle these complexities is basically going to determine how far we're going to go in providing the security architecture in the Indo-Pacific through the mechanism of Quad. Back to you, Mark.
Ambassador Thrigunayat, let's put into context the idea of this being the fastest growing region is what Prime Minister Albanese was saying. I mean, this is something that also needs to be monitored and planned. After all, India is the fastest growing country in this region and is the engine of growth, I mean, to a large extent of the world. And a lot of the trade, I mean, I was mentioning this earlier, $2 trillion worth of trade passes through the Indo-Pacific, going to only increase. How important is this in terms of, the idea of moving of resources and also the management of trade and growth?
Well, that's precisely the reason that everybody is looking at the free and open Indo-Pacific. Because, see, the thing is that certain countries try to have the hegemonistic approaches, try to control them. And because the ASEAN is also one of the regions which is very fast-growing and integrated region. India is the fastest-growing major economy. China is the second largest economy. On the other hand, the United States that comes into it, apart from many other countries. So that's why what they are mentioning is essentially is that this is a very strong, economically strong region. And apart from that, the exploitation of the ocean resources, that is another thing, that is the next level cooperation that is going to play out. But for that can only work when there are no contestations in the sense that are going to be devastating for the ocean wealth and others. So that's why it's very important. And as you rightly mentioned, that the trade transit that takes place through the region is very important for us, all the energy supplies, everything. So this is a very important. That's the reason the United States is so focused here. And right. India is a resident power in the Indian Ocean. So therefore it has to protect itself here. And we have seen what recently India has done in protecting that through the Houthis and others, that when this came.
Absolutely.
So India is a major player and is looking at that. But what I gather is that now there is a greater focus of the other 3 countries also towards Indian Ocean and this realm. This is particularly an additionality which we are going to see from this time onwards.
Ambassador Thrigunayat and Dr. Swasti Rao, thank you very much for joining us during this hour. We're going to continue our coverage, but for the moment we're taking a short break on this special broadcast of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States of America, where the Quad Summit is currently on. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.